You are listening. Second guess myself. Okay. You are listening to A Scary State, and this week we're talking about Missouri. So, Lauren?
Yes, Kenzie.
Let's get scary.
So, I have things to tell you about my 18-hour road trip.
Fun.
Where we did go through Missouri, so it's very fitting. So the drive wasn't as horrible as we thought it would be.
That's good.
Yeah, the wedding was absolutely beautiful. It was such a great time. It was so great.
All good things.
I did the thing, too, where, like, the wedding was in this beautiful, beautiful chapel. And it was very, very small. So we're, like, very close to each other. And when the bride starts to walk down the aisle, I love to look at the groom. And so I looked, and he was all teary-eyed, so I got all teary-eyed. And it was just very, very cute.
I sobbed at your wedding.
I know. There's a picture of it. It's so cute.
So I used your tissue that I was holding for you to wipe my tears.
Best friends right there.
There you go.
But so the hotel we stayed in.
Oh my God. That, like, I would have said, nope, we're finding a new one or sleeping in the car.
So we pull up and it's all the doors to the rooms are facing outside, so you like enter through the outside.
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay, that makes sense.
And there was a super creepy picture of some super creepy kids. So
oh, yes.
I had to send it to people, and I was like, this place is haunted. So Joe and I, we were in, like, the, like, suites.
Ooh.
There was, like, a bathtub in the room. It was a whole thing. I don't know. It was, okay, so anywho. So you go through this door that leads you into, like, the hallway, which is, like, the main lobby area. That's the one I sent you guys the video of. Yeah. Super, like, haunted, creepy vibes.
Absolutely.
But it was warm, creepy vibes. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it wasn't like bad spirits.
Right.
Yeah.
It felt very warm.
Yeah.
And so I think it was the next day we went ziplining, which was so much fun.
Cool.
And then afterwards, we're just, like, hanging out. Like, we're walking around with Dave, and we're kind of going through the whole city of Eureka Springs, which is so cute.
Oh, fun.
So we went into their hotel. It was the Basin something hotel. Can't remember. But we walk in, super old school hotel.
Okay.
And I look over, and they have, like, Ghosts of Eureka Springs shirts. And, like, so apparently it's a haunted hotel. And I was like, how cool.
That is cool.
So we're, like, walking around. I'm, like, looking around corners. I didn't see anything. But it was very cool. And then right down the street is the Crescent Hotel. The reason that sounds familiar is in our Arkansas episode, Mom covered Crescent Hotel.
Huh.
Right. So they did
circle.
They did a ghost tour Thursday night. Joe and I didn't join because we were so tired from the drive, the 18-hour drive. But yeah, so everything was great. Great time. We're coming home. We're 2 hours into this 18-hour drive. Yep, we get a little maintenance required light, and Joe and I look at each other and we're like, because as we were starting and going, the car felt stally.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm not about to break down on a back road in rural Kentucky at 2 a.m. with no cell phone service.
Oh, sure.
So we rented it through, like, a company. So we called their corporate office, and they were like, oh, well, you're going to have to do a swap. And we're like, oh, what does that entail? They're like, oh, you're going to have to find a store, go swap out your car, and, like, keep going on with your trip. Well, the store that was close by didn't have any cars until the next day. Not happening. And it's a Sunday, and we're in Missouri. So half of the other stores aren't open.
Mm-hmm.
So they found one for us, like, 30-ish minutes out of the way at an airport.
Mm-hmm.
So we drive to the 30 minutes away at the airport, have to wait at the booth, talk to the guy, wait forever, get our car, switch out the stuff. So we added on a good 2 hours to our 18-hour drive. So we left Eureka Springs at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday. We got home at 10:30 a.m. Monday.
24 hours.
Yeah. But, one of the nights we went to, like, this dive bar. It was so fun. But we did karaoke.
Love karaoke.
I sang, and I sang.
You sang at karaoke? What? I didn't realize that was the concept.
I don't like singing in front of people, but I sang Bye Bye by Jody Messina.
OMG, when I tell you that song is like the breakup anthem of, like, and fuck you. Oh my God, I can sing every word.
And not that, like, I relate to it, but I was, like, staring at Joe singing the song.
Fuck with me and bye-bye, mister.
And there was this girl, she was really, really good. And at one point,
you know, You hate those.
I know, you do. But I mean, they looked great. They were on like a girls' trip. So they had all like girl trip shirts.
Can't hate on them.
Leather leggings and then bright, sparkly like booty shoes, like heels. They looked very, very cute.
That.
But so she came up to Joe as I'm like waiting for my song to start. And I'm like, what are you talking about up there? And so I'm like staring at him. I'm like, I am on stage. Stop talking to her. So she like leaves. And after the song, I go back. I was like, so what was that about? And he was like, oh, she wanted me to sing with her. But I told her like, you know, my wife probably wouldn't like that who was about to sing. And so she walked away, thank goodness. But then we had a single guy in our group. So we were like, go sing with her. So they sang together.
Okay.
I know. Joe was like, it's okay. Like, I'm just good looking. And I was like, oh, cocky here.
Weird request.
I think it's because she wanted to sing that song Shallow from A Star Is Born.
Okay.
And I think she just really wanted to be able to sing that song for the girl part. Not I don't think she cared about anything else. She just wanted to be able to sing it, so she just needed a guy to sing the guy part. You know what I mean?
But it's not like Joe was the only one in there.
I know. He was the cutest one in there, but... And then him and I sang
Beauty's
You're the One...
in the eye of the beholder.
Oh, shush.
Love you, Joe!
And then Joe and I sang You're the One That I Want from Grease.
Aw, that's so cute!
Yeah. Okay, so my two creepy things.
Okay.
So we're walking around Eureka Springs, and, you know, I love my, like, spooky stuff. So there's this table, and this, like, man and woman are sitting at the table, and they're doing readings, like, card readings. And so I was like, all right, I'll do this.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, one card. So I said, great. So they made me put my hands over two decks and kind of feel the energy of which deck.
Sure.
And I thought I would want this one deck that had a really cool backing, but I picked the other deck, which I thought was interesting. So let me pull up my notes. It was a very long conversation, so I am going to drastically reduce the thing. So I pulled the burden card, and I was like, oh, shit. And so it's like not tarot cards. It's like card reading. So it's like different cards.
I was
so
like,
not
that's
just,
not a thing.
No, not tarot cards.
Okay.
So it was the burden card. And it's like two people are facing forward and there's a rooster on top of them and they're all looking in one direction. And so pretty much they were saying that I need to tap more into my feminine side and less in my masculine side. And I was like, well, my job is very like male focused.
Sure.
So I was like, so maybe that's, you know, I have to like.
I was going to say, I would not consider you masculine.
No, I wouldn't either, but I feel like my job is very, like, masculine.
Yeah, because it's male-dominated.
Yes, exactly. And that I need to let things go as in, so, like, you know, if you're sailing a boat and you are, like, pushing the, like, gas or however boats work.
Pushing the gas?
Whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you're full throttle with a boat.
Okay.
Okay. So it's going forward. And then when you stop with that, it will still coast on its own. So they said that I need to let myself do that. So like with things that I want, like I don't need to push on the gas. I kind of like need to coast and let things happen as they will. So that's kind of what I pulled from that. And I like, you know, obviously talked about the podcast and the guy was like, he's like, I'm not just saying this. And he's like, but I really do think your podcast will be a success. And I was like, I really hope so.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And Joe and Dave and like their other friend were just kind of sitting on a bench and I'm like, I'm enjoying this. So I'm just like talking to this lady and this guy for like 20 minutes. The second creepy thing. So we're driving back home. We're going through Kentucky. It's 2:20 in the morning. Joe's asleep. I'm listening to my creepy podcast.
Oh, good.
And up in the sky. So it's 2 in the morning. So it's dark. And in the distance. So you know when the sun is setting and the sky is orange. So take like just a teeny circle of that and put it in the sky. That's what I saw. So like this
was
one.
It the lunar eclipse thingy?
I'll show you a picture of what I took.
Okay.
Because maybe. But it was just like, and this one spot in the sky, and it like kept moving as like not like a spaceship or anything, but it was just like a part in the sky that looks like orange clouds. And at one point, all of a sudden it just got brighter. And like that made me look at it, and that's when I took a picture. But I have no idea what it is. And it only lasted, I only saw it for like 20-ish or so minutes, and then I was gone and I didn't see it again.
Huh.
I'll show you the picture.
That is weird.
If we remember, we will post the picture. If you live in Moorhead, Kentucky, which is where it happened, please let me know. So see, you would think it's like the sun setting, but it was 2 in the morning. So obviously the sun's not setting.
Huh.
Right. And then swipe over one.
It kind of looks like there's something, like in this picture, it kind of looks like maybe there's something shining up.
That's what I was trying to think, but it was just so up in the air and just such a weird spot that
is very bizarre.
Right. And so, of course, I was like, I have to take a picture. So, yeah, it was just very weird. Like, it was a cloudy night, but it's not, there's nothing that should be that bright.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're in Moorhead, Kentucky, and you know what this random orange light is in the sky, please let me know.
That is bizarre.
But then, of course, I looked that up. I was like, orange light in the sky in Moorhead. There was an alien sighting there in the 70s. Right in Moorhead.
There you go. They're coming back.
They are. All right, well, I think I've talked about Missouri enough. Oh, also, we stopped.
We're about to talk about it some more.
We stopped at this place called Uranus. It was a little town, and we got fudge because the quote is, the best fudge comes from Uranus. And then I think I showed you that video. So they had this box in the corner of like this jail, and it said, caution, baby rattlers. And so we walked up to the box, and inside were little baby rattles. It was so funny.
That's cute.
Oh, and we saw the world's biggest belt buckle there. It was quite a trip.
It sounds very interesting.
Quite a trip. It was so fun.
Hodgepodge of activities.
It really was. And I think that's why something had to happen on the way home, because it was just too good of a trip.
Yeah, you can't have it that good.
Where something had to happen, because it couldn't be like, oh my God, you've had this amazing trip. Here's one thing that has to go wrong.
When I travel, if the flight to wherever I'm going was like smooth and fine, I'm terrified for on the way back because I know that it can't happen twice.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So
my mentality as well. All right. So
are you gonna ask me about my weekend?
Oh my God, how was your weekend? Oh yeah, how was your weekend, Mackenzie?
I had the best time with Roy. We were buddies.
Mackenzie was the best friend ever and watched Roy.
Oh my goodness. And the last night he came in like 4:45 and he like was standing there. I was like, come on. He does not know the word come.
He walks the opposite direction sometimes.
Or he just stares at you. And so I was like, hey, come up. And he comes up onto the bed and just like lays in the little crevice of my legs. And then when I woke up, we snuggled for a little bit and petted.
He loves his morning snuggles.
Yeah.
He came in last night at 1:30. He came in the night before at about 4:30. Yeah.
He was a good boy.
And then we get about 15 minutes of snuggling when I have work.
Yes.
Much more when I don't have work.
But no, he was fine. It was fun. It felt like a little mini vacation, even though I had to go home like 5 times because I kept forgetting things.
Good thing you're so close.
Yeah. So it was nice, though. It was fun. We had a good time.
Good.
We went for a really long walk. And I was getting really annoyed because I was like, stop looking up at the loft.
Oh, he does that all the time, and it's so freaking creepy.
And I was like on the side of your couch that's closer to the lamp because I was coloring and I needed to be able to see. So I had direct vision of it. And he kept looking at it. I was like, stop it.
I hate it. I hate it so much. And it's like the loft is always dark. Yeah. No, not a big fan.
But no, he's a very good boy.
He is a very good boy.
He's great. I had a great time.
Oh, good.
But that was all I did. Just hung out with the dog.
And he was probably so freaking happy about that.
I was too, so it was fine.
Yeah, we get really excited when we just get to stay home with him.
Shame.
All right, so about Missouri.
Tell me about Missouri.
In 2000, a man was convicted of armed robbery and given a 13-year sentence, but Missouri forgot to even put him in jail. They only realized this 13 years later on the date of his release. So he served his time. In 1993, a man named James Robert Scott didn't want his wife to come home at a certain time, so he damaged a levee on the Mississippi River. He did this to delay his wife's arrival so he could party, fish, and have an affair. Well, the damage to the levee caused the river to flood 14,000 acres and became known as the Great Flood of 1993. Because of this, Scott was convicted of, quote, causing a catastrophe and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He will actually be eligible for parole next year.
What a man thing to do.
Right.
What a very male thing to do.
God. Instead of maybe not partying, fishing, and having an affair.
Get a fucking divorce, dude.
Right. The Gubber Burger, invented and made
what?
The Gubber or Goober, Guber,
like I can spell,
burger, invented and made popular by the Wheel Inn restaurant, offers a hamburger slathered with peanut butter. The restaurant is now closed, but before, this was a popular place where people far and wide would come to try the burger.
I'm all for some sweet and savory.
I love peanut butter, but this is a no from me.
Not on my hamburger, though.
No.
I'll draw the line.
A man named Valentine Tapley was a hardcore Democrat. He vowed that if Abraham Lincoln won the election, he would never shave his beard. Well, from that point on, Tapley grew out his beard until the day of his death. It reached to be 12.5 feet or 3.1 meters long.
That's disgusting.
3.81 meters long. Even longer.
That's really gross.
I know. There were so many earthquake tremors between December 1811 and April 1812. One of these strong earthquakes caused a fluvial tsunami in the Mississippi River, causing the river to run backwards for hours.
Huh.
Yeah. So I always think it's interesting when a state has a state dinosaur or a state fossil.
Ooh.
But Missouri state fossil is a crinoid. So it is a marine animal that looks like a plant. So it's very odd looking and I don't like it. So you should look at it. It's unsettling.
Okay.
The state dinosaur is the Hypsibema missourianus.
God bless you.
Enzi. It kind of looks like that duck-billed dinosaur. Not that one, but like similar.
Ducky.
Yeah, similar to it. The largest beer-producing plant is here. Only Rome has more fountains than Kansas City.
Huh.
Missouri is known as the cave state, having over 6,000 caves. Jesse James was born in Kearney. And there's actually a Jesse James wax museum that they really want you to visit if you're driving through Missouri. The man who killed Jesse James, Robert Ford, was born in Ray County. James Earl Ray, who assassinated Martin Luther King Jr., moved to Missouri when he was 6 and continued to be raised there. Mark Twain was from Hannibal. Brad Pitt grew up in Springfield. Akon was born in St. Louis. And Eminem was from St. Joseph.
I thought Eminem's from Michigan.
Says he was born in St. Joseph.
Oh.
So he maybe moved to 8 Mile.
Because he's definitely from Michigan.
Yeah, but this is where he was born.
Got it.
Apparently.
Okay.
Based on the notes that we know sometimes are not always true, but we have the websites to verify the information.
Based on Google.
All right, Mackenzie, what are you telling us about today?
So today, I decided to focus on some of the unsolved mysteries that have happened in Missouri.
Good. That
Thank
was
you.
very good.
Thank you. It gets better. So our first mystery brings us back to the days of the Wild West. People were going hog wild over the pig theft crimes in the community. The tension between community members would eventually snap, causing murder and mayhem. So, Matthew Mack Marsden was a livestock trader in Jefferson County, Missouri. Marsden was known in town as being a thief, arsonist, and suspected of murder. Marsden grew up in a small log cabin that his father built near Sandy Creek, and he came from a family of lead and tin miners from England. His grandparents originally lived in Illinois, but moved to Missouri to start the mining efforts in that area. Marsden's father was a well-respected man in the community. He is responsible for commissioning a large barn-like cover across some sort of bridge that is the length of the creek. And this area is now considered a historical site and park. Mack enjoyed watching baseball games up in St. Louis from time to time. His family was one of the well-known families in the community. The Mosses, the Johnstons, the Hensleys, and the Marsdens were like the big families, the big four. So all these families are connected in various ways through marriage and children. Mack's uncle was in the livestock business and taught Mack all he knew about livestock trading and things like that.
About the business.
About the business. So Marsden married his longtime sweetheart, Emma Jean Hensley, from the big Hensleys.
Mm-hmm.
They were a very well-known family, very respected in the community. Her family were well-known evangelicalists. I can't say that word. And
no, I think that was right. Evangelicalists.
Something like that. And preachers, and they established the Sandy Baptist Church, which I think is still there or used or something like that.
It's still there or used? Oh, used.
People go to it.
Right, yes.
And pray or something.
Yep.
They only had one child together, a son named Samuel Matthew Marsden in 1879.
Why does Marsden sound so familiar?
I think there's an actor.
Oh, okay.
With Marsden, because I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
That it was like some things, but I couldn't think of who it was.
Okay.
So I need to give a little disclaimer, because a lot of where I had originally got my information from on Wikipedia, some of it I had to change a bit because I listened to this guy who did this whole, I think he's like a family member.
Oh.
Like his uncle is this guy's cousin or uncle or something. I can't.
Some familial relationship.
He's not far off in terms of generation wise from this dude.
Okay.
So he got into it because in his uncle's study, there was a pistol. And so he would ask about it, and his uncle told him about this story. So as he got older and he started to see all the connections with, people in the community, he decided, let me look into this and see what's going on.
Oh, cool.
So he wrote this whole book about it, was not going to pay $24 to read this book. So I listened to him talk at the local library and pulled shit from that.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
But YouTube does not do very well at captions.
No, they don't.
So there's some people that I have no idea what their last names are.
Okay.
Because I couldn't understand him and the captions didn't help and I didn't know which one was right.
Yeah. Nope. I gotcha.
So just a little disclaimer as we go through the rest that there's going to be a lot of first naming in here.
Okay.
Less so than we normally do. So, but no one has the same name, so it's fine.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Well, except for one, but that's fine.
Of course.
Not relevant. Anyway, Mack's troubles began with the crime wave that flooded the community.
Sometimes we have to repeat lines if we say it wrong. Because said it wrong, and I reacted the first time, and I forgot to react the second time. That was a really good one.
Thank you. It's okay. The other ones are more obvious. So there was a series of burglaries and arsons, and sometimes there were arsons to cover up burglaries. Most of what was being stolen was the livestock from the local farmers, mainly pigs, since that was pretty much the main livestock that was raised in this area. So a man named Arson Vale came to Jefferson County from New York, and Vale had a lot of money and would loan that money to the members of the community. If the loanees couldn't pay back their loan, then they would put up their livestock as collateral and have to pork it over to Vale. That's funny.
That was funny.
So it's going to sound like this kind of goes all over the place, and it kind of does, but it's all connected, I promise.
Okay.
So that's Vale. So now there's this other guy. His name is Joseph. Some sort of German last name. Goober, something like that.
Okay. I'm sure it was Goober.
Something.
Goofy Goober.
I wanted to write Uber, but then I was like, well, I can't spell this, and if I'm going to spell it how I think it is, it's not going to come out the same.
Uh-huh.
I do know for sure his name is Joseph.
Okay.
Okay.
We got that solid.
Got that part.
Solid fact.
Yeah. He is a hotel owner, or he's an owner of one of those general stores.
Oh, yes.
And apparently above it, there's a hotel.
Oh, okay.
Bunch of other things in the area.
All right.
He owned a lot of shit. So one night, he's woken up by this fire that had started in the store. So the family rushes out of the house and the hotel and starts to attempt to put out the fire, which when I was hearing this story, I was like, you wouldn't call the fire department because you can't. So yeah, you would have to do that yourself. That's weird. Because they're talking about going to the well thingies and getting buckets and
oh my God.
And I was like, there's someone who has a job for that. Why didn't you go get them? Mm-hmm. Because they can't. Because they're not there.
Very simple reason why.
Very simple reason why. So, as the neighbors are coming out to help, a shot rang out in the darkness. Mr. Vale had been shot and killed, but no one was able to see who the shooter was. It took me a very long time to pin those two together of who the fuck was shot. I was like, who died? Joseph? I know Mr. Vale dies at some point. And then later on, I was like, oh, that was the one who died? Oh my God, it was so... You should have seen my notes.
Okay, so who was the one who died?
Okay.
Just so we all have this clear.
So, Vale, big money guy from New York, he's killed.
Okay.
By somebody.
Okay.
Don't know who.
Okay.
During this incident.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, the town sheriff obviously began to investigate. A lot of people said that they saw Mack with Vale the night he died. So, of course, Mack was questioned, and he was like, yeah, I was with him. I was paying him back the loan. Mm-hmm. He was all proud of it. He, some even said he was waving as he passed people. It's not like he was trying to hide the fact that he
was going there.
Yeah. So he was really proud. He was like, yeah, I was paying him back my loan, in full. Mm-hmm. That's why I was there. So people didn't believe him for whatever reason. Not this incident specifically, but because of the thefts and things like that, people for whatever reason were starting to point the finger at him that it was his fault. And so
I guess if you're the last person.
Well, of the thefts.
Oh, yeah.
And there, from everything I've gathered, there was no basis for any of this.
Yeah.
So it seemed like the sheriff, among others, had a bit of a vendetta.
Okay.
So, the sheriff is really dead set on getting Mr. Mack in jail. Well, after the death, Mack goes to the store that Joseph owns.
Yeah.
And goes to buy something. However they dealt with money, another part of the story I did not understand. But what you need to know is that the money that Mack used to pay the store owner was the same money that he had given Vale for paying back the loan.
Oh.
So he now had this money back. Vale's dead.
Yeah.
And he now has the money again.
That he's using.
Mm-hmm. So Joseph is like, aha! It was you! You shot him!
I mean...
You have the money. It's your fault.
I mean, not a bad little connection there.
Mack was like, be careful what you say. Don't do that. Well, of course.
Don't do that.
Yeah. So, of course, Joseph goes and tells the sheriff. Mack is arrested. He's going to go on trial. However, right before the trial, guess who dies?
Mack.
Joseph.
That's what I meant.
Yep. Some people obviously are going to look to say, well,
right,
because now that the witness is dead. This is probably my favorite pun of them all. So Joseph was set to testify about the money used in the transaction, but he was shot and killed before the trial. And so at this point, it was real shot in the dark to get a conviction. My favorite one.
That was a good one.
Thank you.
You got some good ones this episode.
I know. I would try to change it up so that it was a little bit to do with the story or other puns, because I feel like I did a lot of light puns. So obviously people suspected that it was Mack because,
well,
Yeah. So they thought he was responsible for Joseph's death because due to lack of evidence, he was acquitted. So, but unfortunately, Mack's troubles did not acquit there. So the local newspaper laid blame for all of the crimes at Mack's feet. The murders, everything. Everything was Mack's fault. The pig stealing, the murders.
Of course.
The arson, everything. Mack's fault. It gotten so bad at one point that Mack's father even stepped in and was like, this is not true. And the point being is that Mack's father was a pretty prominent member of the community, so he could get people to listen.
Yep.
But even that wasn't enough. Is my story that exciting?
Roy breathes loud when he's excited.
I don't know what you want. Mack's father was so fed up with accusations that he comes to the defense of his son about the thefts and other crimes. Mr. Marsden was saying that his two nephews, John and Alan Marsden, were actually the ones who were responsible for stealing the pigs.
Okay.
Something that was interesting was that most of the victims of these crimes were from the Hensley family, which are Mack's in-laws.
Okay.
Why would you steal from your in-laws?
Right.
So, despite his father's efforts, Mack and his cousins, along with Tommy Moss, were arrested and indicted for the pig thefts. So Mack agreed to testify against his cousins in court, which of course didn't please them. And they're like, well, we're going to testify back. So, tension's growing. Not good here. So this newspaper that had said that it's all Mack's fault, they called for a vigilante committee.
Oh, because that's what you want.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So over 100 men met at a barn. He said the barn. I couldn't understand where the barn was, but it's a barn. So over 100 men at this barn signed an agreement to clean up the community. It had, after all, become a real pigsty. So all the men were arrested and released on bond. So the 4 men, the Mack, his 2 cousins, and then Tommy Moss.
Mm-hmm.
But something was weird because Mack had to go to some sort of special bond hearing in a special place, which apparently was sketchy because there's a lot of justice of the peaces and judges that live in this particular town. So it was weird that he had to go here.
Was there a courthouse in that town?
I think so.
Okay.
Like I said, this was one of the parts that I was like, where? What? I tried to go back and rehear it, and I don't know.
Interesting. Okay.
But it was sketch because it would have been just the sheriff and Mack traveling to and from by themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mack's family knew.
Yeah.
Went along with them.
Yeah, good.
So as they're coming back, I don't think the sheriff's with them at this point because it was not mentioned that he was with them at this point. But as they're traveling back, all of a sudden, this large, massive men start charging after them.
Oh, geez.
And it's not just Mack, it's his family members too.
Right.
And, chasing them. They wanted to lynch him for these crimes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Crosses over his daddy's bridge. Well, the bridge his daddy built.
Mm-hmm.
It's everyone's bridge. He, like, whips around, shoots his gun 3 times into the air, and says a really great line.
Because crossing the bridge, does that put him in his property, like on his own property?
It might.
Okay.
I wasn't sure about that part. But regardless, he whips it around, shoots the gun 3 times. Everyone stops. He looks at the men and he goes, "You men have been mighty brave until now. Who's going to go first?" And whatever bravery they had was all gone because they left. Ran away.
Good for him.
This time.
Oh.
So a couple weeks later, before the pig trial, Mack and his good friend and brother-in-law, Alan Hensley, not the same.
Okay, I was just gonna wonder.
There's the Marsden Alan.
Oh, okay.
With 1 L.
Because I was about to say,
There's Alan Marsden, who's his cousin, 1 L.
Yeah.
There's Alan Hensley, his best friend and brother-in-law, 2 L's.
Oh, okay.
So, there you go.
Because, yeah, I was about to say, the person who you're just, like, going to court with,
yeah,
you're now friends with.
No.
Okay.
No. Different guy. But they were traveling. They were coming back from St. Louis. This guy said to watch a baseball game. Wikipedia said from selling livestock.
2 vastly different things.
One thing's for sure, they were coming back from St. Louis.
Okay. Solid facts.
Yeah. So as they were traveling back from St. Louis, they were ambushed by a group of men. The men had jumped out of hiding in a remote location that was on their route home and immediately shot Mack. Dead. Done.
I also came up with a really good pun too late. I was going to say, so the overarching theme is they're coming back from St. Louis.
There you go.
Okay, sorry.
That's a good one. There was another shot that was fired, which hit Alan, but his horse was spooked, and that worked out because it safely carried him to the next town.
Oh, how convenient.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, awful, but convenient.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, he was only able to survive for 2 more days before he succumbed to his wounds, and in that time, he was able to name the men responsible for the attack. Brothers, John and Alan Marsden, along with another brother duo, Tommy and Jimmy Moss. Tommy is one of the other ones arrested.
Mm-hmm. I remember the Moss.
Uh-huh. So who done it? Apparently, Alan's dying declaration was not enough evidence to arrest these men. Right. I think it had more to do with the fact that there was really not many people that were upset in the community about Mack dying. John Marsden was found guilty of stealing the pigs, but he was pardoned after serving for 4 months. So despite the men not going to trial, although one said they did go to trial and were acquitted, but whatever.
I know, there's so much just random information.
I'm going to go with this guy because he's the one who wrote the book.
Okay.
So I feel like what he said is got to be it.
Mm-hmm.
So they were worried, though, about some of the repercussions because, of course, word of mouth, everyone's going to know that Alan was like, these guys did it.
Right, yeah.
So they pieced out. They moved to Arkansas.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, a new sheriff comes to town, and he's like a no-nonsense kind of guy, big crusader, and he began looking into Mack's death. He decides to bring those men back and arrest them and charge them. But I guess due to lack of evidence, although Alan was there, I figure that's got to be pretty credible.
You would think.
But
eyewitness report.
Right, exactly. But they were acquitted, and no other charges have been made. So to this day, it is still unknown about who committed Mack's murder. And something to note is that the crime wave crashed after Mack's death. Convenient. But I do have a weird ghost story that ties to this.
Oh.
Yes. So I was listening to this guy talk, and towards the end, he was obviously taking questions from people in the audience. And so a lot of there were some people who were, distant family members from some of the other big families that he mentioned, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So a couple things. So there's this guy named Fidello. I don't know I can't remember how he's related to all this. But Fidello marries... Oh, no, I do remember how. So Fidello is like the manager of another store that is in a different place from the Joseph guy.
But does like the same kind of like convenience store thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when Joseph dies, closes that store, brings everything, and runs the main store. Well, then Fidello marries Elizabeth. And apparently this guy said that when he was writing this, a bunch of family members from both sides, Fidello's and Elizabeth's, said that Fidello killed Joseph so that him and Elizabeth could be together.
Oh.
Because remember, they also don't know who killed Vale.
Right.
And they don't know who killed Joseph.
Right.
And, well, they kind of know who killed Mack, but, So,
interesting.
What is funny is that, like, this was the unsolved crime that came up, and I was like, but we kind of know.
Yeah.
Vale and Joseph, we have no fucking clue.
Mm-hmm.
That's the unsolved part.
Yeah.
But thought that part was funny. The weird ghost story. So, again, distant relative. So one of Mack's uncles, I think it's like someone from their side, like his kids. Mack was their great uncle or something like that.
Oh, yeah. All that weird stuff.
Mm-hmm. So they have this land, which from what it sounded like, it was that barn that the vigilante guys had gone to, which somehow either, I don't know if it became a Marsden property, if it had always been a Marsden property, but it became one, or was one. Well, Kathy, who was the daughter of Dick and Betty Marsden, and I believe Dick was one of Mack's uncles.
Okay.
Something like that.
What a tangled family web.
I know. I was trying to get them all straight, and I was writing really, really fast. So it's a hodgepodge.
Yeah.
The interesting part is that, so Kathy and her brother, who had already passed, they were going to sell the property. Bunch of land. The dad is in an urn that's still on the property. And that was a whole big to-do of, like, what should we do with this? And Kathy was like, nothing. Don't do anything, because, I don't know, she was afraid something was going to happen. Number 2 was that apparently Betty, the mom, said that she wanted to be buried, like, in a really nice car that she liked. And when you're looking on the land, apparently there's one spot where there's a different type of grass that could be about the size of a car.
Interesting. The
weird part is that this property has been through 5 different families, and all 5 families who have lived there, their oldest child has died.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awful.
Isn't that? And, like, the guy was like, so that's my next book. So I wrote it down, 1, to, like, say it because that's really interesting, and 2, gonna come back to that one.
Yeah.
Figure out what that is.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. So that was the creepy part. But yeah, so that's the unsolved-ish case of Mack Marsden. But I'm not done, because our next criminal exploded onto the scene in fall of 1977. For 5 long months, the South County bomber spread fear among the residents of St. Louis County, Missouri. Did you get it?
The bomb. I got the bomb one.
Our next criminal exploded onto the scene. Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't see.
I was smiling.
Still.
Mackenzie, that was a very good pun.
Thank you. It gets a little less punny because I didn't want to be too insensitive.
Yeah, that's what makes it just a little bit difficult sometimes to do the puns.
I felt like the other one was long enough ago that it was safe. So this one, I do have some puns in here, but it's only when they're, like, appropriate.
Okay.
So, like, that one, and then you don't hear one for a really long time. So our story begins. Our story begins with 23-year-old Ronald Sturgos. Ronald had recently moved to St. Louis from his hometown of Greenwood, South Carolina. Ronald was a chemical engineer for Monsanto.
Sorry, so you said it. Monsanto.
Because I'm sounding it out. Because I don't know. Just so everyone else knows, because I didn't know what Monsanto was. It was, at the time, one of the leading companies in the production of chemical, biochemical, and agricultural products.
Interesting.
Apparently, it was one of the first ones to, like, work with GMOs or something like that.
Oh. So
Ronald traveled from his apartment in Melville, Missouri, to a plant across the border in Sauget, Illinois.
Illinois,
sorry. There shouldn't be a fucking S there if you're not going to say it.
There's a lot of things that shouldn't be in certain words.
I mean, my last name alone.
Yeah.
So annoying.
Possum, pterodactyl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pneumonia. Any user. So apparently these places are really close together, meaning the border between this place in Missouri and Illinois.
Yes, understood.
I have no concept of geography outside of Virginia.
I know.
But his commute was only 20 minutes.
Nice.
So on October 7th, 1977, Ronald was preparing to head into work like any other Friday morning. He got into his 1976 Toyota sedan, turned the ignition, and was blasted out of the car.
That's always something that scares me so much when starting my car.
Did I tell you about the coolant thing?
No.
So my coolant light came on.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I needed to put coolant in my car. I could not get the fucking cap off.
Do I remember you telling me this?
I'm going to tell it again anyway. It was stuck. So the next morning, I got a wrench thing and I pried that sucker off. Well, part of my radiator, or whatever the fuck the coolant goes in, is like kind of under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a funnel, but I have no idea how I used it before because it was like, there is no way that I can use this funnel and it goes just into the hole.
Right.
I did something. I don't know. I poured it in there. Some of it got in, but a lot of it got everywhere else. And I was like, I don't know what that means. So my car might blow up. So I had like a random scarf in my car. So I grabbed it and like kind of tried to dry things up. I filled up the coolant enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I get in the car and I'm sitting there and I was like, okay, this might be when you die.
Oh, no.
But that's okay. And I like closed my eyes as I like turned on the ignition. And I was fine, obviously.
Obviously.
But yes, I was very concerned that
Oh my
my car
gosh.
was going to blow up.
It is funny when there's those moments where you're like, this could be it.
This
but,
could be
you know,
it.
let me just close my eyes and we're going to go for it.
Mhm, pretty much. So people who lived several blocks away could hear the explosion, and windows nearby in the nearby apartments were blown out from the blast.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm. Miraculously, though, Ronald was entirely unharmed.
Wow.
So obviously he was in a state of complete shock and disbelief, but other than that, he was perfectly okay. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for our next two victims. So a couple weeks after the first bombing, a second explosion had occurred in the early morning of October 18th, 1977. Robert Jackson was a safety supervisor for the United Parcel Service at their headquarters in Earth City, which awesome name for a city.
Yeah, that is kind of awesome.
Yeah. The 39-year-old lived alone, but all that knew him would describe him as a kind and quiet man. Robert would spend time during the week traveling to different places throughout the state, giving lectures on driver and plant safety. On that particular day, he was heading out early to travel to Union for an employee training. He stepped into his 1976 Ford Thunderbird, nice car,
Yeah.
turned the ignition, and the car and, unfortunately, Robert were ripped apart from the explosion.
Jeez.
Yeah. A neighbor would describe it to reporters as sounding, quote, like an earthquake. Police were only able to identify Robert by his driver's license and parts of a wristwatch that were identified to belong to him. Robert's explosion was much larger than Ronald's. The bomber was using 2 to 3 sticks of dynamite along with C4 instead of only 1 stick of dynamite like he did in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Police really didn't think at this point that the two bombs were related to each other. There's no connection between the men, and Ronald had survived.
Yeah.
That was until November 3rd, 1977, when the third bomb exploded, killing 33-year-old Shirley Flynn. She was a computer programmer and analyst at Interstate Supply I'm sure that's supposed to be company.
What do you have it as?
Compant.
Well, the Y and the T are right next to each other.
Yeah. I'm sure that's supposed to be company.
Probably.
Shirley recently divorced her husband, which, pause. I was annoyed when I was reading this guy's, like, thing about this.
Mm-hmm.
The other men, their jobs came first. And then the fact that they lived alone or weren't married or whatever. It described her as a 33-year-old divorcee.
Of course.
I'm like, she is a computer programmer and analyst at Interstate Supply Company.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a big deal.
But she's a woman. Kenzie, come on.
The only reason I even mentioned her divorce is because she was living with a boyfriend. And he's important to the story. Rude.
You know that women don't get any they deserve.
I know. But I was like, this article is written
by a man.
By a man, yes. But also recently enough that there's no reason he could not have. Anyway, so she recently divorced her husband and moved into the Southmore apartment complex. She had been living with her boyfriend, William Olahausen. Well, they had been living together for the last 4 years on the morning that she was killed. Shirley was on her way into work at around 8:30 in the morning. She got into her boyfriend's 1972 Ford Pinto turned the ignition and was killed instantly on impact.
Was the first car a Ford as well?
I thought the same thing. Nope, it was Toyota.
Ah.
Because I also was like, well, the second one was a Ford.
Yeah.
This one's a Ford.
Mm-hmm.
No, the first one was Toyota.
Ah.
Yeah, because I went there too. The windshield of the car had been blasted all the way to another nearby roof. This bomb could also be heard from several blocks away and blew out windows of several of the surrounding cars. So this was the third bombing in the past month, all within a 2 to 3 mile radius of each other. And at this point, police began to think that these bombs were connected, and now they needed to figure out how and why. So the police worked with the ATF, which is the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau, which is, I don't understand. What kind of things do they investigate with alcohol and tobacco? Like the firearms, okay, yeah. Like when bombs go off,
I could see like illegal, like moonshine maybe?
I guess. I don't know. I didn't look into what they do. I just looked into what they were.
Yeah.
And they're the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau.
It is interesting that they put alcohol, tobacco, and firearms together.
Right. Like, great combination.
Those are 3 things you don't want one person to be on at the same time.
Yeah, no.
Alcohol, tobacco, and then there's the firearm.
Mm-hmm. Could really be a
lethal combination.
There we go. That's a good one.
Thank you.
They dug extensively into the victims' backgrounds. Ronald was described by his coworkers and friends as a nice and quiet guy. No one was really suspicious of Ronald or knew of anyone who had issues with him. Ronald himself told investigators, "I have no troubles with anyone." Police couldn't find anything to dispute that. Ronald had only been in the area for about a year, so not much time to make any enemies. Ronald had parked his car in front of his apartment around 7:30 p.m. on Thursday night, and so that would have given the bomber about 12 hours to place the bomb under Ronald's car on the driver's side.
Oh, wow.
Connecting it to the ignition of the car, which would then cause it to explode when the car was turned on.
That's a smart person, honestly.
So it gets interesting. Robert had lived in the same apartment for the last 8 years. All of his neighbors would describe him as friendly and kind. He was adored by all his coworkers. He spent his Friday nights at Pines on St. Charles Rock Road with his fellow United Parcel workers. He was described as keeping mostly to himself and never getting into or causing trouble. At the time of Robert's explosion, police believe that both men were specifically targeted for one reason or another.
It kind of seems like it.
Yeah.
Like if you're picking a specific car.
Well, right. That was kind of one of the things they looked into was like, was there any cars, that were like Robert's that maybe the bomber got confused with, put it in the wrong place, that kind of thing. They couldn't find any sort of nothing. Both bombs had similar wiring and were attached to the ignition of the car. The only difference was obviously the size of the explosion in each of the bombings, but at the time they didn't believe they were connected, and some also started to believe that the first one was maybe like a test run. And
that would make sense if he or whoever the bomber is, if they upped it for the next one.
Right. So no connection, think they're completely separate until Shirley's explosion a few weeks later. Shirley was getting ready to drive her boyfriend's car when it exploded. The car had been parked and untouched for the last week. Shirley had been driving her 1976 Chrysler previously when William told her that it needed to be taken in to get serviced. William was riding his motorcycle, and so Shirley was going to take William's car into work that morning because I'll get to that later. Shirley was liked and respected by her coworkers and bosses. She was another victim that police could not find any possible motive for why they would want her killed. At this point, police did begin to suspect that the bombs were connected. However, they had no idea how they were connected. They couldn't find any connections between the victims, not even the same car mechanic.
Yeah.
They weren't even sure if Ronald's bomb was connected to the other two since he didn't die from the explosion. Some thought that Ronald's explosion might have been practice for the real deal. At this point, the residents of St. Louis were on high alert. Because these bombings were beginning to look like random acts of violence, no one was sure who the next victim would be.
Right. That'd be terrifying.
Right. Police were doing trainings on how to check your vehicle for signs of tampering. And the police and federal authorities also offered a $20,000 reward for any information regarding the bombs or bomber. They tried to determine which leads sparked potential and which ones fizzled out. See? An appropriate pen.
Very appropriate.
Thank you. Here's what police knew for sure so far. The bombings all occurred in the early morning, with the ignition of the car being the detonator for the bombs. So all the bombings occurred around the same area and all were in apartment complexes. This made it a lot easier for the bomber to blend in, unlike in suburban areas.
Mm-hmm.
The bomber probably had some sort of mechanical knowledge and knew enough about bombs to, quote, keep himself from being blown up.
Good point.
Mm-hmm. Authorities believe the bomber to be, quote, deranged or have a significant level of mental illness. Expert psychologists agree that he most likely was a loner with sociopathic tendencies.
See, I believe that more than like...
I was a little perturbed when, like, they were saying deranged or mental illness. I'm like, but it's not...
Right.
You know, it's, like, more than that. Like,
yeah.
But, I mean, it's the 70s, so it's not surprising that that's
true, yeah.
how they went. But still, there's definitely a much better way that they could have said that. Police Captain E.J. Hannigan told reporters, we're looking for any pattern in the bombings. Geographic, social, cultural, anything. So far, the only links between the victims that we have are the fact that they were all from the same general area, all middle class, and all targets of bombs wired in almost exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Investigators went down every avenue of theories and ideas, trying to see if one of the bombings may have been deliberate and the others used as a diversion, but they could not find any motives to harm any of the victims, so they quickly dismissed that theory. The only person that the police thought could have had a possible motive was Shirley's boyfriend, William Olenhaus.
Well, because I was going to say, should we be looking into him because it was his car?
We get into that. I saved his story for last. So William Olenhaus was from Blackwell, Oklahoma. He got his electrical engineering degree from New Mexico State University. Once he moved to St. Louis, he began working at the St. Louis Ship Company. I spelled that one right. As an engineer while he was working towards a graduate degree in business administration. William became the prime suspect for police after the death of his girlfriend, Shirley Flynn. Police began to investigate William's background and what his relationship was like with Shirley. Friends and family reported a happy relationship, but it was not without its troubles. Shirley's friends and family had told police that lately William had become really controlling of Shirley. When I was reading this, I felt like it was kind of like a stretch. Because what it sounded like, I was like, I mean, I get it, but I think what's that word called? Fishing. Oh, couldn't think of it. So apparently Shirley had told friends that William was refusing to get married. However, between his 2 divorces and her 1, he was a bit skeptical of marriage.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, fair, kind of.
Yeah.
Apparently, William was also spending a lot of Shirley's money.
Oh.
And she was very unhappy at her job and wanted to leave, but stayed after William's insistence. And it was later discovered that if Shirley had quit her job, then it would also cancel out her life insurance policy.
Interesting.
Which would have gone to William upon her death.
Interesting.
So it said 2 life insurance policies. I don't know if it's like one for him, one for her, but they were worth about $46,000 combined, which is $200,000 today.
Oh. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like a good amount of money.
Yeah. But her family contested it because of relationship problems, supposedly. I don't know how that turned out, though. It didn't say. It didn't highlight that fact.
That much.
Yeah. So something else that rang alarm bells for police was the fact that Shirley took William's car after he said that hers needed repairs.
Right.
William had been driving his motorcycle all week, leaving the car parked in the complex parking lot until Shirley drove it that day.
Mm-hmm.
Had not moved. Because William had taken Shirley's car to get repaired, she had no choice but to take William's to work that day.
And also, you wouldn't think anything of it, you know?
Another interesting fact that police learned was William had rented a room in a motel that was across the street from the second bombing. Like, he rented the room the night before it happened. Mm-hmm. He had told Shirley that he was out of town for work and gave no indication as to why he rented the room, although some suspect, obviously, an affair. Mm-hmm. But he was in that room the night before Robert Jackson's death. Some believe he was having an affair, but William never admitted to it.
Yeah.
William was questioned many times by police with some inconsistencies in the retelling of his accounts. His neighbors began to believe that he may be responsible for all of the bombings. After all, there hadn't been any more following Shirley's. Until March 8th, 1978. when the work van that William had been driving exploded in the parking lot of a motel in Paducah, Kentucky.
Was he in it?
Yeah.
Oh.
He would regularly travel to the area for work, and like the others, he went to start the van, and that caused the bomb to detonate. Thankfully, William survived the explosion. It was later discovered that the only reason that he was saved was because the hat he was wearing protected him. It protected his head from any major injuries because when the bomb caused him to hit the roof of the van.
I didn't even think that.
Yeah. So William was taken to Western Baptist Hospital and doctors were able to quickly stabilize him. However, his injuries were so severe that he ended up staying in the hospital for several weeks.
Ooh.
Yeah. Major damage to the lower part of his body.
Yeah.
Well, because of the attack on William, obviously investigators began to doubt that William was the bomber all along. Would he really try to clear his name by risking potential death and or serious injury?
Maybe.
That was when investigators were told about John Steincooter.
That is a name.
When I was trying to figure out what it probably was as I was writing this, I was like, we're going to go with John Steincooter. And I'm going to go with it because John's not nice. So we don't really care if we say his last name wrong.
Yeah.
So
we did try. But because we couldn't verify, we don't care.
Exactly. So John previously worked with William, but lost his job the previous year. It seemed like that he lost his job because of William, but it didn't outright say that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I'm going to go ahead and assume. Many reported that John was very adamant about his anger and hatred towards William.
Oh, good.
Few things to know about Mr. Steincooter. He was currently facing charges for holding his wife and children hostage the previous month.
Good.
And would later be brought up on rape and assault charges relating to the incident. See, we don't like him.
Yeah, no.
Don't care what his last name is.
Mm-mm.
He was also responsible for placing a pipe bomb in his mother-in-law's home in efforts to kill her so that his wife could receive her $150,000 inheritance.
Wow.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So we have him making pipe bombs, and then we have other man who is like an engineer.
Yeah, but no bombs.
Yeah, but still.
Still, let me keep telling you about John.
Okay.
Steincooter. Thankfully, the tape cassette he placed it in was not touched by his wife's mother, and they were able to remove it before it caused any damage. Police had also been called to John's home around the time the bombing started after a neighbor called to say that they saw him put something suspicious into the neighbor's trash cans. When police investigated, they found an ether bomb, which I tried to look that up and I could not figure out what it was.
I don't know either.
All it kept taking me to was something about cryptocurrency, and I was like, that's not it.
That's not right.
That's not it. Google's really kind of let me down these days. Just saying.
Dang, Google.
Yeah. It was later destroyed in landfill. So, trying to blow up his mother.
Yeah.
Hates William.
Uh-huh.
So, was he responsible for the bombings? Because remember, it was William's car.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
However, the only tiny caveat here is that he was in jail the night that William's van exploded.
Oh my gosh.
But authorities would later share that the bombs could have been placed on the vehicles months prior to the explosion.
Just not like hooked up yet?
I don't know. I tried to figure it out.
I don't understand how bombs work, so I feel like this is difficult for us.
I was very nervous to start looking that up.
Yeah, probably not the best search history to have. How to make a bomb.
Especially because at this point I was at work.
Yeah.
So I went back in the article that I was using and like really tried to read through it. And when I looked at all the like the work cited stuff, it was all like articles from that time.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay, it's when he wrote it, it made sense.
Yeah.
But he didn't explain how.
Right.
But somehow, I guess with the wiring, I don't know if it was purposefully done that way to have a delayed,
like to come back to it later.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So because of the knowledge that the person had of the wiring of cars and bombs, the reason that the bomb did not go off the first time, that was the reason that the bomb would not go off the first time you turned the car on, where it could go off months later.
Oh.
What they did know is that it would take at least 20 minutes to get the bomb wired properly, and because they couldn't pinpoint a day or time when the bombs were planted, it was very hard to pin down a suspect.
Well, yeah.
But they knew it wasn't like crime, like mob related, because it wasn't quite sophisticated enough. Although when I read that, I was like, that seems pretty damn sophisticated.
Yeah.
You can get that bomb to not go off the
every time, yeah.
first time you turn the car on.
It wouldn't be every time. It would be
Right.
one time.
So, who knows? However, this did provide some leeway for putting John Steincooter at the scene of the crime because at the scene of the crime because it could have been months.
Yeah.
So he could have had time to plan it and then gone to jail.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But because all evidence up to this point were circumstantial, no arrests were made in connection to the 4 bombings.
Dang.
I'm not done. Don't dang yet.
Well, I'm danging right now, so we'll see what happens after this.
So who done it? An interesting sidebar is that the article that I read shared some information from profilers that had been used in the investigation and then other investigations.
Oh, cool.
In future whatever.
Okay.
So they also concluded the idea that he was a loner and with sociopathic tendencies, meaning he had no care or concern of other people's well-being, especially as a result of their actions.
Yep.
So this person also put an excerpt from John Douglas. He was an FBI profiler.
Oh, yeah. He helped with, he was like Mindhunter kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the name of the book.
Yeah.
It was Mindhunter.
Yeah.
So he included an excerpt from it that just kind of explained the type of person a bomber would be.
Did you ever watch Mindhunter?
No.
You would really like it. I think you would really like it.
Every time I see it on whatever I'm scrolling through, I always think of you saying that because you always tell me that I would really like it.
What do I? Oh,
yeah.
Well, because I think you would really like it.
Yeah. So this is what he said. Bombers tend to fall into one of 3 categories. There are power-motivated bombers attracted to the destruction. There are mission-oriented bombers attracted to the thrill of designing, making, and placing the devices. And there are technician types who get the gratification from the brilliance and cleverness of their actual design and construction.
Interesting.
As far as motives, they range from extortion to labor disputes, revenge, or even suicide. Our research into bombers shows a repeating general profile. They are usually white males, the age determined by the victim or target. They are of at least average intelligence, often quite above, though underachievers. They're neat, orderly, and meticulous, careful planners, non-confrontational, non-athletic, cowardly, and inadequate personalities. The profile comes from assessing the target or victim and the type of device. Is it more explosive or incendiary, for instance? Much as we profile a serial killer from a crime scene. We would consider the risk factors associated with both the victim and the offender, whether the victim was random or intended, how accessible he or she was, what time of the day the attack occurred, the method of convenience, such as going through the mail, as well as the idiosyncrasies and the components of workmanship and the bomb. All the information gathered together. If you think about it, even with Shirley and the fact that she had taken William's car,
Right.
that all men were, or all the victims were men.
Yeah.
Between 23 to 39. All lived alone. Well, minus William. And all lived in an apartment complex. So, obviously, there have been other bombings since this one. The Oklahoma City bombings, the Unabomber,
Boston Marathon.
Whole bunch. However, no bombs have had similar composition or types of wiring and things like that these bombs have, and eventually the investigation went cold and is still unsolved to this day.
Dang.
So,
that's wild.
Right?
I feel like if that had happened now, they'd have a lot easier time of like trying to figure out who did it, just because like the knowledge we have.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure with the amount of technology that...
Because when did all this happen?
1977.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were like a couple other bombings that happened in the area, but one was like a pipe bomb. And they were like, he probably didn't all of a sudden change his MO to be less impactful.
Right.
John and his wife were charged with the attempted murder of her stepmom for the inheritance.
Oh.
Yeah.
How convenient that came out.
He got 18 years. She got 8, but I think she got out early or something.
Dang.
Like that. So.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
So that justice was served.
And I knew it wasn't going to be solved because you're doing unsolved crimes, but...
Got you going, didn't I?
I did. Yeah, you did.
See, aren't you glad I waited a day before we did this? Because I was not even done with the first story when I texted you.
Yes, I am.
So, but after I like really got into this one and like was fleshing it out, I was like, I don't need a third one.
No, definitely not.
I was getting sleepy. So I'm going to save that one for next time.
Perfect.
So those are my unsolved mysteries.
All right. So the story I have today is going to be devilishly good. All right. So
I'm assuming that pun will make sense later.
It will, yes.
Okay.
So in the 1940s, a young 14-year-old boy had to have a series of exorcisms performed on him. This story is actually what inspired the 1973 film The Exorcist, which I talked about on our DC episode.
Available wherever you get your podcast.
Yes. And that young boy is known under the pseudonym given to him by the priests who performed his exorcisms, Roland Doe or Robert Mannheim. So for the rest of the case, I'm just going to call him Roland. Why are you looking at me? You're trying to think of a pun, aren't you?
I don't know, something with Roland in the Doe.
So Roland was born on June 1st, 1935 in Cottage City, Maryland. He was born into a German Lutheran family. Lutheranism was founded by Martin Luther. He believed that the Bible was the written word of God and the only guide one should have for faith and practice. Lutherans believe that the Bible is the only divinely inspired book and the only source that has divinely revealed knowledge. They believe it is the only norm for Christian teaching, and over time these beliefs
They all believe that.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Each one believes it's their own.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
But over time, these beliefs have changed a bit, but I'll digress from all of that. I just wanted to give...
The beliefs change?
Right.
Shocked.
So I just wanted to give a little background on the religious aspect of the family and, like, you know,
Sure.
how they are a religious family.
Yeah.
So Roland was described as being quiet, unpopular, but highly studious. His mother and grandmother were both overbearing, but his father was very distant. His father was a federal government worker. Surprise, surprise, in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
So probably relatively busy, and Roland was an only child, so he would often have to look towards the adults to entertain him. But Roland did have a special bond with his Aunt Harriet. His Aunt Harriet. Do you say aunt or aunt?
Aunt.
It all depends on who I'm talking about.
It's not an aunt, it's an aunt.
Yeah, but, like, I have, like, you know, I wouldn't say, like, Aunt Diane. It's Aunt Diane.
It's aunt.
But then it's Aunt Janine.
It's aunt.
It differs. So Harriet was a spiritualist and was very into the spiritual world. This interest eventually spread to Roland, and soon enough, Aunt Harriet introduced the young boy to a Ouija board. And Roland had a fascination with playing with them, which should actually always be a no-no, unless you understand how to use one, the proper rules when dealing with one.
Don't do that.
Just, like, don't do them. So, unfortunately, Roland's aunt eventually passed away soon after in January of 1949, and that is when he started to use the board more in an attempt to contact her.
Aw.
I know. That is also when strange things started to happen around the family. The first thing that happened was that Roland and his grandmother started to notice a dripping sound coming from somewhere in the house, though they could never pinpoint where.
Oh my God, I can imagine. That alone would drive someone insane.
Oh my God, I know. Then the two of them witnessed a painting of Christ violently shaking on their wall. Weird and strange noises were also being heard all around. The family thought at first that a rat had gotten into their walls and was scratching at the walls.
That would make sense.
This scratching continued for 10 days until it suddenly just stopped. They believed the rodent had died.
Yeah, also makes sense.
Because they no longer heard the scratches.
Right.
But Roland still heard them.
Did I tell you about the bug? There was a time that I was coming back from Virginia Beach. I was sitting on my couch. I think I was watching TV. And I heard this like, ting, ting, ting. I was like, the fuck? It was one of those things every time you pause,
it stops. Yeah.
So I was like, what the hell? So like I paused it. I went looking around. And you know those like Thanksgiving tray things, the tinfoil ones?
Mm-hmm.
I looked in. And I shit you not. A big ass fucking roach was in there. And the only reason it couldn't get out is because it couldn't stick itself to the tin. And so the scratch, scratch, scratch I heard was the bug trying to climb out.
I hate it.
I took my Swiffer and I shuffleboard curled it out into the backyard. Just like tossed it back there.
Genius, actually.
It was about as good as it was going to get. We also sprayed like any sort of chemical spray that we had first.
Oh, good. So you probably created like some noxious gas or something.
I don't know. We tossed it out. Well, I tossed it out. And then our neighbors were getting like tree stuff done. And so when they came to clean up the yard, which also was our yard, they took it. So who knows what happened to the bug. But whenever I hear the scratch like that, that's what I think of.
I don't like it.
No, neither did I. Was not a fan.
So the family thinks the scratching's done. Roland's still hearing it.
Yeah.
Family doesn't hear anything for 3 days, and then they hear it again. But this time, it's no longer in the upstairs bedroom, but had moved downstairs to Roland's bedroom. Not long after that, they witnessed a Bible rising from a bookcase and coming to land at Roland's feet. A chair that he had been sitting on rose from the ground and tilted forward, knocking him off the chair. Another chair that he was sitting on, a rocking chair, started to spin in circles like a top. Other normal, ordinary, everyday items like vases would fly or levitate when he was around, and things just continued to get more aggressive.
Oh my God.
I know. It's
like
bad.
Matilda, but bad.
Yeah, evil Matilda. At night, heavy furniture would move in his room. This is when he started to sleep talk, and in his sleep, he would yell obscenities. Obviously, his family called in all sorts of doctors and psychologists to look at Roland, but they were unable
Maybe he was yelling obscenities to tell the ghost to shut the fuck up by moving his furniture.
Maybe.
Trying to sleep.
But he was a quiet boy, so we never did that.
True.
And now, all of a sudden, he's doing it. So the doctors, psychologists all looked at him. They were not able to find anything wrong. So after this failure from the doctors and psychologists, his parents took a bit more extreme approach. They turned to a minister from their Lutheran denomination from D.C. to help them. They believed they may be dealing with a demonic possession. The family turned to Luther Mills Scholes, their Lutheran pastor. Pastor Scholes had been interested in parapsychology for a long time. So parapsychology is the study of psychic phenomena and other paranormal claims. So you can imagine how excited he was at this opportunity to study someone to see if
hell yeah
he could figure out this parapsychology thing and enter himself in that field. So Pastor Scholes wanted to see if this boy would fall into this category, and he wanted to observe that. So he offered and then arranged for Roland to stay a night at his house so he could observe him. Scholes claimed that things did in fact occur when Roland was with him. He witnessed different household objects and furniture moving by itself. But another parapsychologist named J.B. Rhine didn't necessarily believe Scholes' claims. He, quote, wondered if Scholes unconsciously exaggerated some of the facts. But without being able to provide any real advice to help the family, he recommended that the family see a Catholic priest instead. The next person to enter the scene was Edward Albert Hughes, a Roman Catholic priest from St. James Catholic Church in Mount Rainier. The Mount Rainier in Maryland. Not Washington. So while examining Roland...
Didn't realize there was two.
I didn't either, because I read Mount Rainier and I was like, now what? And it's in Maryland.
A lot of this is happening in Maryland. You never talking about Missouri, right?
Yeah, thank you, Mackenzie.
Okay. Just saying.
I will get to Missouri.
Okay.
I just have to set the scene. Yeah. So while examining Roland, Father Hughes noticed that he kept looking at and could not take his eyes off of the Bible, which Hughes said was a definite sign of possession by evil spirits, obviously. I know. I was like, okay. Reverend Hughes saw the boy and decided to give the family some blessed candles and a bottle of holy water. So he must not have thought it was too intense at this point. Well, this did absolutely nothing and provided no protection, because Roland's mother immediately called him back and told him that some unseen force had picked up the bottles of holy water and smashed them. Then the blessed candles had shot up to the ceiling.
Sorry.
So whatever this thing is can touch these, like, holy things. Well, the Reverend returned to the house, and when he did, he heard Roland recite a phrase in Latin. The phrase translated to, quote, "O priest of Christ, you know that I am the devil. Why do you keep bothering me?"
Yeah, man, leave him alone.
So not only was this phrase troubling and scary, but what was even worse was that Roland recited this line perfectly, though he had never studied Latin.
Ooh.
Hughes was at a loss, so he contacted his superior, Washington Archbishop Patrick A. O'Boyle, for advice.
What an unfortunate last name.
Yes. After being contacted and hearing all about what was happening to the Reverend and Roland, Archbishop O'Boyle allowed for Hughes to undertake an exorcism, which is not an easy thing to get permission to perform in the first place. So there are some requirements that must be met in order for an exorcism to be approved to be performed. So the first is a thorough examination that is required to include medical, psychological, psychiatric, all of that of the evaluation of the person in question.
The whole nine.
If it is determined that the devil truly is at work, a major exorcism can be performed with the permission of a local bishop, and that exorcism can only be performed by a priest or a bishop. So the person... Why are you looking at me like that?
No, I'm just listening.
Oh my god, it was like... So the person who performs the...
I'm trying to just change position. So I'm like sitting up straight. I know I don't sit up straight often.
No. So the person who performs the exorcism has usually received specific training in order to do so. The exorcism then needs to be performed in a church or a chapel rather than the afflicted person's home. So TV and shows usually show it, like, in the house.
Yeah.
That's not typically how it should happen.
Makes sense.
In order for this exorcism to happen, Roland was taken to Georgetown University Hospital, a Jesuit institution, in late February 1949.
Fun fact. So my dad, Catholic, and my grandfather, he was part of this group called Clavius, something like that. But basically what it was a bunch of math professors, smart people that also were Catholics that would get together and hang out. And it was like every year that they would, and it would be all over in different places. And Georgetown is one of the places that they meet.
Very cool.
So, fun random fact about me. They're all very nice people.
I bet they are.
They're like, it's like, well, because obviously now they're very old.
Yeah.
But it's like a bunch of grandparents just hanging out together.
It was kind of cute.
They're very nice people.
Oh, good. So the exorcism begins, but it had to be halted shortly after it started. Roland had been able to slip his arm out of one of the restraints, pulled, then broke a bed spring from the mattress he was on, and then used it as a weapon. He slashed the priest's arm, which resulted in a serious injury which required a number of stitches.
So it sounds like the devil really sprang to life.
Because the exorcism hadn't been successful, because it hadn't been completed, Roland was still tormented. One day, the word Louis appeared, scratched into Roland's skin. For whatever reason, the family took this as a sign that they needed to travel to St. Louis.
What? Like, there's moments where I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. All these family members are witnessing this. I can get on board with this. And then they say shit like that.
But St. Louis was his mother's hometown.
Okay.
And they had family there.
Okay.
So it makes a little bit of sense.
Okay.
So I guess they had a little conversation about this trip, thinking out loud about when they would leave. That's when the word Saturday appeared on Roland's hip. So took that to mean Saturday. And when they wondered about the length of stay on Roland's chest, another message appeared that said 3.5 weeks. Sounds like pure misery.
I'm sorry. Great pun. But I'm just like...
My thing was, you see your son getting scratched. Stop having a conversation about your trip. Maybe tend to your bleeding child.
That's just...
Right. Yeah, poor kid.
Yeah.
So at the time, he was Lutheran, but he had converted to Catholicism and joined St. James Parish in an attempt to make the exorcisms easier to receive. I guess. So shortly after arriving in St. Louis, now we're in Missouri, the family started to see more messages appearing on their son's skin. These messages were always scratches and blood. One of these messages said, quote, no school.
I feel like Roland is now rolling with his possession and using it to his advantage.
We'll get to some things like that.
Okay.
So after this, one of the family's cousins began reaching out to some religious figures to see if they could find anyone who would be able to help the family. The one cousin attended St. Louis University and contacted one of his professors, Father Raymond Bishop, a Jesuit priest. So Bishop is a priest. Yeah.
Talk about, going with your destiny.
Right. So he went to the family's house to pray over the child and perform a blessing. But as Bishop was praying, Roland's bed began to shake. Then deep, bloody gashes started to appear all over his chest. So Bishop stopped immediately. Soon after...
This devil is not having it.
Right. He's like, we're not good here.
We're staying.
Yeah. So soon after, Bishop reached out to his associate, William S. Bowdern, from College Church for help and a full exorcism to hopefully be performed. The next month, March of 1949, Reverend William S. Bowdern and Reverend Walter Holloran traveled to St. Louis to where Roland and his family had been staying in another attempt to exorcise the demon from Roland. They received permission from the Archbishop to perform the exorcism, and they had 9 Jesuit priests who would also help do the exorcism with them. So, during the events...
A whole crew of people.
Really, they really do. So during the events that were unfolding, Father Raymond Bishop had been keeping a diary where he documented everything that happened from the beginning of the family having issues to the end where Roland was finally exorcised. Shocking surprise, that's how this ends. So...
What?
Yeah. So a diary entry from March 1949 said about the exorcism, quote, next, the fathers began the litany of the saints, as indicated in the exorcism ritual. In the course of the litany, the mattress began to shake. Roland was awake. The shaking ceased when Father Bowdern blessed the bed with holy water. The prayers of the exorcism were continued, and Roland was seized violently, so that he began to struggle with his pillow and the bed clothing. The arms, legs, and head of Roland had to be held by 3 men. So this diary entry said that the Litany of Saints prayer was performed. This prayer is one of the oldest in the Catholic Church, and it is still used. It is most commonly used at times when special guidance or graces are needed. Makes sense. So it was noted that during the day, Roland would be calm and would exhibit normal behavior, but at night, the behaviors would become strange, which would include screaming and wild outbursts. His bed would shake, objects would go flying, he would speak in a guttural voice, and he would show a strong aversion to anything sacred and religious. He would suffer violent gyrations. He would still talk in his sleep, but now it had turned to singing Old Man River, I don't know what that is, and Swanee, also don't know what that is, in a high-pitched voice with tremendous volume. And during those moments of his break in possession...
I've been working on the railroad.
I don't know if that's it.
I don't know.
But it could be.
Could you imagine how annoying that must be?
How terrifying that would be.
Well, yeah, that too. But like,
yeah,
saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's like my children.
Yeah. So during the breaks in his possession, that's when his true self would show. So he would tell the priest that he saw himself, quote, fighting a huge red demon who felt slimy and was very powerful, and that the creature was preventing him from escaping from a fiery pit. The exorcism had reached extreme levels on March 20th when Roland urinated all over his bed and began shouting and cursing at the priests. At one point, his behavior had gotten so bad that the priest decided to try to baptize him, hoping that maybe that's what they needed to do.
I thought he was already baptized.
I guess not.
Oh.
He was just following, or maybe they thought to baptize him again. I'm not really sure. So on the way to the church, Roland tried to take control of the car and make it swerve off the road with the main intent of crashing and killing everyone on board.
Oh my God.
It obviously didn't happen. The baptism didn't help. So in the diary, there was an entry dated April 11th, 1949. It said, quote, at midnight, the fathers planned to give Roland Holy Communion, but Satan would have no part of it. Even while the institution of the Blessed Sacrament was explained to Roland, his body was badly scratched and branded. The word hell was printed on his chest and thigh. Upon the explanation of the apostles becoming priests and receiving our Lord at the Last Supper, scratches appeared from Roland's hips to his ankles in heavy lines.
Oh my God.
Seemingly as a protest to Holy Communion. So, baptism, not working. An X also appeared 2 times on Roland's chest, and the priests were led to believe that Roland's body was possessed by 10 demons. X is 10 in Latin.
God, poor kid.
I know.
It's a lot.
So when the Holy Communion and baptism didn't work, Bodern was given permission to perform another exorcism. This one took place at the Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis, which soon changed names to South City Hospital. So it's still technically like a religious place, but it's a hospital. So before this next exorcism was to begin, Bodern made sure that Halloran was there to assist him. The 2 men were joined by William Van Roo, another Jesuit priest, who was also going to be there to assist with the exorcism.
How many priests they got at this point?
Now they have 3 main ones. But then we also have bishop, and then we have like the other Jesuit priests. We just got a lot of people coming in and out.
I think 10 might be the magic number.
For the 10 demons?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. So this exorcism was very intense. Halloran stated that during this exorcism, he saw the words evil, hell, and other marks appear on Roland's body. At one point, Roland even punched him so powerfully that the Reverend's nose broke. That is where, on April 18th, a miracle occurred. It was the Monday after Easter Sunday, and Roland was awoken by a seizure. He was yelling and shouting out things like Satan would always be with him. The priest laid holy relics, medals, crucifixes, and rosaries on and around Roland. Then, at 10:45 p.m. that evening, the priest called on St. Michael. So St. Michael is the spiritual warrior in the battle of good and evil. So they called him to help expel the demons from Roland's body. 7 minutes later, Roland came out of this trance he had been in and said, he's gone. He told the priest that he had had a vision of St. Michael vanquishing Satan on a great battlefield. Roland recognized the presence of St. Michael, the archangel there, and the demon possessing him was expelled. When it was expelled, there was, quote, a sound like a gunshot that was heard throughout the hospital.
Oh my God.
In the end, over 30 exorcisms had been performed on Roland. An excerpt from that diary I talked about had an entry from August 19th, 1951, so a couple years in the future, that said, quote, R and his mother and father visited the brothers. R, now 16, is a fine young man. His father and mother also became Catholic, having received their first Holy Communion on Christmas Day, 1950. A 2013 report from the Daily Mail, a British newspaper, reported that Roland had gone on to raise a family with 3 kids and have a successful career in the government, and that he moved back to Maryland and still lives there. It is also believed that he named his first son Michael in honor of the saint who saved him. But not all ended well. Apparently, one of the priests who helped Roland didn't come out of it well. He is said to have been on the brink of insanity at the end of the 30-plus exorcisms that had to be performed. He had also become possessed himself. On his deathbed, he used explicit words against a nurse and even tried to choke her, which clearly was unlike him.
Oh my God.
So he did not end well. It did not say which priest it was just one of the priests. The Rare Books and Archives Division of St. Louis University Pius XII Memorial Library houses documents that are related to this case, which include case studies and historical articles, if anyone feels so inclined to read about them. There was a book written in 1993 by a man named Thomas B. Allen titled Possessed, The True Story of an Exorcism, where Allen details a lot of what happened during this exorcism. In his book, he stated that the diary of Father Bishop was probably never meant to see the light of day. He wrote that in St. Louis, his diary had remained a secret and was stored in the security room on the 5th floor of the Alexian Brothers Hospital, and that the door to this room remained completely locked. Some say that this is where the exorcisms occurred and that there is now a giant permanent crack in the concrete.
Oh, wow.
Everyone who's worked at the hospital, all the brothers, the maintenance workers, everyone knew why the room would remain locked. And as the years passed, the rumor about the diary and the locked room were passed down to the new brothers who came to the hospital. They knew the wing that the room was located on had been for, quote, extremely ill mental patients. That portion of the hospital was demolished in the 1970s. Alan writes, quote, the demolition worker handed the diary papers to his boss, who passed it on to the administrator of the hospital, a layman. The administrator read the letter, which was signed by Father Raymond J. Bishop, a Jesuit from St. Louis University. Then the administrator turned the pages of the diary. Words on the pages, Satan, diabolical, a huge red demon, exorcism, stunned him. Horrified, he realized that the report revealed the secret of the locked room. I know. But after all of that, Alan stated that the consensus of today's experts was that Robbie was just a deeply disturbed boy, nothing supernatural about him. And he wasn't the only one who had doubts about the validity of the possession of Roland. Some believe that there was a medical explanation to what had happened, rather than a supernatural one. Many believe that he maybe suffered from schizophrenia or Tourette syndrome, but again...
But if he's fine now, it's not like that just gets cured.
Right.
And what about the scratches? It's not like he walked out of a room and, like, they saw it, right?
I will get to the scratches.
Okay.
So a local occult historian named Mark Travinsky wrote about the case in a 1999 article for Strange Magazine, saying that the boy faked his demonic possession. Mark Opasnik, who wrote The Cold Hard Facts Behind the Story that inspired The Exorcist, was skeptical of many of the supernatural claims that were present with the story of Roland's exorcism. He believed that Roland was just a spoiled bully who would throw tantrums to get attention or to get out of school. He went on to rope Reverend Halloran into his theory by saying that the Reverend claimed that he never heard Roland's voice change and become guttural, and that he believed the boy didn't actually know Latin, but rather would just repeat phrases and words he had heard the clergyman say. When the marks were found on Roland's body, his nails were never checked, so it's possible that maybe he had inflicted these wounds and marks on himself.
I interpreted it as when they were happening, like they saw them.
That's what I interpreted
appear,
it as well.
Not like they walked away, came back, and they were there.
That's how I had it, like, the same way as you.
Yeah.
So Opasnik investigated the story a bit and was able to uncover a few more things. He said that the exorcism originally had occurred at the boy's house at 3210 Bunker Hill Road in Mount Rainier, Maryland, but apparently the family had never even lived there. Their home was in Cottage City, Maryland. And fun fact, their house has been abandoned and has been that way since the 60s. Most of the information collected about the events are based on hearsay, so they weren't documented and were never fact-checked. There is also no evidence that Father E. Albert Hughes had ever visited Roland at home, had him admitted to Georgetown Hospital, attempted the exorcism at the hospital, or even was injured. Opasnik said, quote, to psychiatrists, Roland Doe suffered from mental illness. To priests, this was a case of demonic possession. To writers and film video producers, this was a great story to exploit for profit. Those involved saw what they were trained to see. Each purported to look at the facts, but just the opposite was true. In actuality, they manipulated the facts and emphasized information to fit their own agendas. He also spoke to neighbors and friends of the Doe family and gathered that Roland was a trickster and very clever. He was known to pull pranks on his mother that frightened her, and he would also pull pranks on the children in the neighborhood to try to fool them. Then, skeptic Joe Nickel weighed in as well, with his beliefs that there was no real or credible evidence.
He gave his 5 cents, huh?
That's good!
Thank you.
Dang it. So,
it's 2 cents, but that's okay.
I liked yours better.
Thank you.
He said there was no real or credible evidence to suggest that Roland was possessed by demons or by evil spirits. He also said that the symptoms of possession can be relatively easy and simple to fake. He said that with the scratches, that a determined teenage boy using a mirror would be able to scratch those hard-to-reach places to make the marks. Apparently, there had been a time when someone did witness Roland scratching hell and Christ on his chest using his own fingernails.
You gotta apply a lot of pressure to scratch
your own skin, I know. So Nickel also said, nothing that was reliably reported in the case was beyond the abilities of a teenager to produce. The tantrums, trances, moved furniture, hurled objects, automatic writing, superficial scratches, and other phenomena were just the kinds of things someone of ours age could accomplish, just as others have done before and since. Indeed, the elements of poltergeist phenomena, spirit communication, and demonic possession, taken both separately and especially together as one progressed to the other, suggest nothing so much as role-playing involving trickery. So he really was like, nah.
Yeah. Nah.
But to the contrary, 2 Christian academics, Terry D. Cooper, a psychology professor, and Cindy K. Epperson, a sociology professor, wrote that when there is a case of possession, it cannot be explained by psychiatry. They believe that there was a supernatural element to the possession regarding the nature of evil. So we really have both sides of this whole thing.
Pretty much like whatever side you believe.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what that one guy was saying. Like, if you're thinking this is a spiritual thing, like, if you're a spiritual person, you're going to think it's a spiritual thing. If you're a sciencey person, you're going to think it's a science explanation.
That's where the whole self-fulfilling prophecy comes in.
Right.
Like, you have this idea in your mind, and
it's going to come.
Yeah, you can find a way to make it fit your narrative.
So yeah, that's the story of Roland Doe, the boy who inspired The Exorcist.
Wow.
Yes.
You really rose to the occasion.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. It's okay. I covered your puns for you.
Thank you. I know. I knew you would help me out eventually.
Of course.
Or somehow. And yes, I know part of it was in Maryland, but we have a good majority of it in St. Louis. That's where all the creepier stuff happened.
Yeah, it's fair.
Thank you. I had to set the scene a little bit.
We'll let it go. They both start with M.
Yeah, there you go. So this is a longer episode.
Hopefully you're still with us.
Follow us on all things. Like us, rate and review us on all things. Yeah.
Stay scary.
Stay safe.